Iran's foreign minister has downplayed the Western country's propaganda hype about reactivating the 2015 nuclear agreement's so-called snapback mechanism. Abbas Araghchi says the reinstatement of the expired UN sanctions against Iran will not harm the country's economy more than what has been already done.
We should not be tricked and deceived by the nation, both in terms of the economy. I have repeatedly said in the snapback, if the resolutions are restored, it's not a good thing in political, but the economic loss wouldn't be greater than what it is already.
Araghchi said Iran presented a fairly logical proposal to the US and its allies to block the snapback mechanism, but it was rejected by them. He emphasized that a possible resumption of talks with the US and the European countries would depend on their confidence-building measures and the introduction of a balanced and fair mechanism for both sides. Araghchi stressed that Iran's firm red line in any talks is the rights of the nation, particularly the nuclear enrichment right, from which Tehran will never withdraw. The top diplomat also warned that Iran is ready to take reciprocal measures if its ships are inspected under the pretext of reactivation of the expired UN sanctions.
Certainly, if Iranian ships are inspected, we will respond in a reciprocal and proportionate manner. I hope that the opposite parties will not create further tension in the region and will move towards reducing tension, because regional tension is not in anyone's interest. If they take any measures, we will also take countermeasures.
Araghchi added that Iran's steady oil exports are the result of years of strategic efforts to bypass international sanctions. Oil trade. Araghchi reassured the nation that Iran's economy is not at risk from additional UN resolutions. He called for bolstering national resilience, urging both the government and people to rely on domestic capabilities to meet the country's needs and neutralize the impact of sanctions. Now, to talk more on this, we are joined by Mr. Jim Kavanagh, political analyst and blogger, joining us from New York, US. Mr. Kavanagh, good to see you again. Mr. Kavanagh, Iran's foreign minister emphasized that a possible resumption of talks between the two sides, the US and European countries, would depend on their confidence-building measures and the introduction of a balanced and fair mechanism for both sides. So, Mr. Kavanagh, is it fair to say that the US is trying to bully Iran like it does with everyone else and even with its own allies, like the tariffs imposed on the Europeans, and that what Iran is asking for is a fair deal?
Oh, yes. The US, of course, is trying to bully Iran, as you say, as they do with the other countries. Look, the Europeans didn't have to do this snapback business. They decided to do it because they do what the United States wants, and the United States does what Israel wants. I think what's very important, one of the things you're saying and your foreign minister is saying, and I hope it's true, I don't know, that, but it seems to me reasonable that whatever sanctions they decide to put on now can't do much worse than what they've already put on. And that the nation can stand it, especially if they have better relations with Russia and China decide to ignore these sanctions, which I think China is certainly giving signals we're not going to ignore any, we're not going to pay attention to any of these American trade sanctions anymore. So that's an important thing to think about. The sanctions are hurting Iran right now, and other sanctions will hurt them, but it seems like Iran has the ability to withstand these things. And what more can you do? But really, look, this is Kabuki. I know Iran has to go through these things. I know for the sake of keeping their allies like Russia and Iran on their side. But the Americans and the Israelis are not negotiating anything in good faith with anybody, certainly not with Iran. They invited your General Soleimani they sanctioned his coming to Iraq for a peace parley with the Iraqis and blew him up with the commander of the Iraqi militia. They sent a peace proposal to Hamas in Doha and blew them up, okay? They attacked your country when you were in the middle of negotiations with them. So, and this is not about nuclear weapons. course, they don't want you to have nuclear weapons. But really, Trump has put forward very clearly, they wanted to renegotiate this whole thing. They don't want you to have missiles that are capable of going, more than 500 kilometers? They want you to stop supporting the Palestinian resistance. That's what this is about. This is about Iran adopting its place in the world order in the region, where it accepts the terms of the United States and Israel, it accepts the existence of the Zionist project, and it agrees to go along with whatever, to work within that, like the Arab countries have done, okay? And that's the only thing that is going to satisfy Israel and the United States. And this is the quandary you're in, okay? And they're not worried about non-existent nuclear weapons. They're worried about your existing military capability, especially the precise and sophisticated missile capability. And your growing, I hope, air defense capability. I hope you're getting all the weapons you can from China and Russia. And they're worried about your support for the Palestinian resistance. And they want you to become an Abraham Accord state, either de jure or de facto, and if you don't, they're going to attack you.
That's right, Mr. Kavanaugh. It seems to be just excuses. Like Arokji stressed that, Mr. Kavanaugh, Iran's firm red line is the rights of the nation, particularly the nuclear enrichment right, from which Tehran will never withdraw. So, Mr. Kavanaugh, how come the U.S. itself, the only country to have used nuclear atomic bombs, it has thousands of nuclear warheads. Israel, which openly said that they should nuke Gaza and get rid of all the Gazans all at once, they have hundreds. Pakistan, India, North Korea, to name a few, but Iran is not allowed to have peaceful nuclear technology.
Well, that's right. They want Iran to be in a state, again, it's not primarily about nuclear weapons. You know, if you had them, it'd be over. This wouldn't be going on to a certain extent. But they want Iran to be taken off the table as a primary arm of resistance to the Zionist project. They want Iran to accept its place, dictated by them by the terms of the United States and Israel in the Middle East and West Asia. And that's what they're looking for. And as you say, this is crazy. This is a country, Israel has nuclear weapons, many hundreds of them. They said 200 a decade ago. And the United States, of course, is a nuclear power. And Israel, you know, unfortunately, Iran is going to get attacked with nuclear weapons. Israel knows how strong Iran is and that it's getting stronger. And if they launch a war against Iran, the only way they can think they might stop getting into an attritional war that they can't survive will be to try and knock you out quickly. And the only way they can do that is with nuclear weapons. They can think they can do that. So it's a very dangerous situation. And you may not be in this situation if you had nuclear weapons. That's your choice. But you know, nobody who used nuclear weapons and who threatens the use of nuclear weapons all the time has the right to come to you and say, you can't have nuclear weapons, or you can't even have nuclear enrichment, which might someday, under some circumstances, lead to nuclear weapons. I mean,
that's right.
So it's hypocrisy, and it's the problematic that you're living under. And in that circumstance, these negotiating games have to be played for various reasons, but I'm afraid they're not for real.
And Mr. Kavanaugh, in short, if you can, just before we let you go, because you talked about the sanctions and you said it can't be worse than the ones before, the new snapback mechanism. How have you seen Iran under decades of crippling Western sanctions, and that it has resisted, endured and coped, or even, as some analysts say, it has even thrived in some areas?
Well, you know, I can't be sure about that. You know, I'll listen to your leaders and I'll listen to them and I'll see. It seems to me that Iran is doing all right. And it also seems to me that the sanctions are not trivial. They're hurting you. And it seems to me, but again, this is what the Russians went through, and they realized, you know what? We'll just figure out a way to go through, get past these sanctions. And once you've hit us this much, once you've thrown all these punches, what punches do you have left? And what I'm hopeful about precisely is now, again, you have allies in Russia and China who are not going to they're not going to obey American sanctions on anybody anymore. They're over that. So I think you can get through that. I think it's not a trivial thing. I don't I can't speak for the Iranian people to the extent to which they are or are not suffering from this, but it seems like you're existing, you're thriving, and you're not going to be put down by these sanctions. And they know that. They're not going to put you down with these sanctions. They're going to need to attack you militarily. So that's the situation that we're in.
On that note, I would like to thank Mr. Jim Kavanagh, as always, political analyst and blogger, joining us from New York. Mr. Kavanagh, thank you for your time, sir.